Hey everyone, welcome back, it's Josh here. If you would like to learn how to cut high quality veneered boards whilst minimising chip out and using a standard cabinet type saw, stick around because I've got something to show you. Okay, so get right into it then. There's a couple methods that I'm sure most of you have heard, and if you're watching this, then you've probably watched a couple of videos on, and they are the score method and the like tape, painter's tape, masking tape, whatever you want to call it. So they're both pretty good options. The major issue that I have with them is when you're cutting in bulk. So sometimes, like we had an order in today, and we might end up cutting like 35 sheets of plywood, right? I am not going to pre-score into like 100mm strips. So I'm not going to pre-score and I'm not going to painter's tape that because it would just take forever. So what we need is we need an option that's going to work for us without rinsing out the amount of time that we can spend on the project, right? Because time is money after all. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you need to prep first. So your saw needs to be correctly set up. Now that means that your blade needs to be parallel to your mitre slot. So the easiest way to do this is by using a steel ruler. Now there are the options of using a dial indicator which work perfectly. My workshop is unheated, and I tell you what, man, in the summertime, well, in the wintertime, it can get to like 1 or 2 degrees in here, to the point where we have to put finishes and that sort of thing in a cooler to keep them warm. And in the summertime, we've only been here one summer. This is going to be our second one. And last year it got to 35 degrees in here, so it's a huge variation. That's Celsius. It's a huge variation in temperature. So you're looking at like 30 Fahrenheit to maybe 100 Fahrenheit. So that 1/4 millimetre that I'm going to get by using a dial indicator doesn't really matter. The other thing to remember when you're doing this method is you need to make sure that you're using the same tooth, because obviously blades can wobble and there might be a bit of bend in the arbor, that sort of thing. So you need to take everything into account. So obviously you use the back edge of the, I personally start with the back edge of the blade, and I will pick a tooth, I'll measure there, and then I'll rotate it round and I'll measure there again. We're going to take the blade and make sure that's parallel to the mitre slot. Then we want to make sure that the fence is parallel to the mitre slot. The last thing you want when you're cutting is, say for example, this is the blade and this is your fence, and it's pointing in like that, and you're feeding the timber from this direction, because you're going to have a pinch here, and then you're going to get kicked back, and that's not what we want. I have seen some people and they slightly kilt it off right at the end. I can understand because they're concerned about kickback, but for us, we always try and keep it dead on 90. Completely parallel because of the type of materials that we're cutting. We don't have to worry too much about internal tensions. There is a bit of an internal tension in plywood, but not like if you're cutting a piece of like oak or walnut that's got a big burl on it or something like that. One thing that I think is really important is using a 0 clearance insert. You can see here, this is the original insert that came with the saw, which obviously allows for the blade to tilt off to 45. This is the one that we use, this is the type that we use as the spare one. There's a huge difference. You can see how much timber there is through there. Huge difference, and that difference is going to turn into tear out on your plywood when you're cutting it. So as a rule of thumb, I always try and use the fence when I'm cutting with the grain, and when I'm doing cross cuts, I will try and use our sled. You can use a mitre fence. We have the UKJ one. I've had a bad experience with that in the past, so that kind of just sits on the wall. I need to sell that. If you want one, give me a shout. But for the most part, when we're doing cross cuts, I will use the sled, or I will build a sled for that purpose. As with my example earlier, I have 2,000 of these units to cut. I think I get 11 out of a strip of plywood, so I've got 200, like 190 cuts there to do, and I'm not going to do them all individually. So I'll stack maybe 10 up or 15 up in one go and cut them on the sled. The beauty with doing that as well is that you're going to the first 14 are going to be supported, the cut is going to be supported by the next one below. It's only the last one that you're really going to suffer with tear out on, so that's awesome. Yeah, it's worth remembering a good quality table saw sled can save you hours of finishing time, and again, time is money. One thing to keep in mind is your blade height. Try and keep the tips of the blades between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, which is 6 to 12 mil above the surface of the timber that you're cutting. What this will enable is it's the angle that the teeth are approaching into the timber. So if we look at it like this, if we're cutting down here, these teeth are coming in almost at 90 degrees, whereas these ones here are coming in at maybe like 20 or 30 degrees, which means it's sort of shearing instead of snapping off the face veneers. So now you've got your table saw set up, what's next? In my opinion, the most important thing is a good quality blade. So there's a few things to remember with these saw blades because they're not all built equal. You get different teeth and you get different grinds. Now, your teeth can range, the teeth on the saw blade can range from like 24 to over 100, and the grinds, well, there's 4 common grinds. So they are FTG, ATB, TCG, and combo. The FTB is flat top grind, so they're great for doing box cuts or finger joints, cheap dados I call them, that sort of thing. Your ATB is alternate top bevel, which is the one that we use. You've got your TCG, which is triple chip grind, and your combo blade, which is like a combination of a couple of them. So the grinds on the blades all have their own pros and cons. Some are better for natural timbers, some are better for man-made materials such as like chipboard, plywood, some of them are better for laminates. So you have to weigh up what you're doing. Now for us, because we cut a huge amount of plywood, we go for a 60-tooth ATB blade. That's a 60-tooth alternate top bevel. Got it. So how an ATB blade works is the teeth alternate between a shallow angle, sort of like a crook like that, and then another angle on the other side. And then it does that all the way around the blade. And because of that, it's just slightly shaving off a little bit every time a tooth goes through, which for us personally gives us the best finish on the boards. So what blades do we use then? So the blades that we use, bear in mind, I'm not sponsored, however, Axminster, if you do want to see. So we use Axminster Excalibur Premium blades. Now, they do a contract range, but we don't use them. The premium ones are not the cheapest, but they're by far not the most expensive. So for us, they're kind of like the best middle of the road. They work extremely well for us, and I think you might get maybe like 10 or 12 sharpens out of them. So for us, they work, that's great. What we tend to do is we have 3 blades, 2 are sharp and one's always off with the sharpeners, and then that way if the one that we've got breaks or dies, then we can just swap that in and out, and yeah, job's good in. And that's it, to be honest with you guys. There's no magic involved in it. A lot of guys sit there and they're like, oh, you know, you must have a really expensive saw, you must have this, must that. It's not. You just need to make sure your saw's correctly set up. I mean, to be fair, it's just like any tool, right? You need to make sure it's correctly set up, that you're safe, and that you have the right tool for the job. So before we go, at the risk of making you think that I'm teaching you to suck eggs, we'll just run through how you want to be cutting a board right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to plan our cuts, right? Everything we do, we know exactly how much waste we're going to have, where the cut's going to go, the type of grain, the grain that we're cutting through it. I think all of that's really, really important on minimising tear out, which is what the aim of the game is. You need to make sure your saw is set up correctly, obviously parallel, square, and you've got the correct blade in there. You want to make sure that your blade height is correct, and that you're using a zero clearance insert. And if you do, so for me personally, when I'm doing a whole bunch of cross cuts, I will try and use a sled just because it gives me the best finish. I can control the timber better, and in my personal opinion, it's a safer option. Another thing to remember is that you want to make sure that the board is flat. Plywood has a tendency to warp, and I tell you what, man, some of the stuff that we've had is like a banana, it's like shaped like that. And that can be really difficult sometimes. It does help if you can allow it to, if you can lay it down, allow it to settle, but sometimes you just need to work through it. So it helps to have the cup upwards as you go through the saw, if that makes sense. Okay, so above all else, you want to be safe, right? You need to make sure you're wearing eyes and ears. I know a lot of you guys will go full on with safety squints and stuff like that. I have had quite a few occasions where a piece of veneer is chipped out and it's hit me on the face, like hit me here or here, and it's bounced off the glasses. Now, if I hadn't been wearing glasses and it had gone in my eye, I don't know whether my eyelids would have shut in time, and I don't want to risk going blind. I wear glasses already, I don't want to risk them getting any worse. Ears are important as well. The last thing you want to be doing is end up laying in bed at night listening to ringing because you can't get to sleep because you've been using power tools all day long. So the last thing I would say is listen to your tools, right? Just like you have to listen to your body when you're getting a bit older. I'm 30 something now, so you know I have to start listening to my body. I just can't go smashing into it like I did when I was 18, 20 years old. Same thing with your tools. It's really important. Obviously still wearing your eyes and ears, but even with your ears on, you can hear whether the saw is starting to bog down, whether it's struggling. If it's struggling, ease it off a little bit, right? Don't keep pushing through, because either it will stall and you'll trash your motor, you'll slip a belt, or you could end up like the blade could shatter, anything could happen. And you know, if you're spending £80, £90 on a saw blade, the last thing you want to do is wreck it. Okay, real quick and simple one for you today, guys. I hope that's helped you out. It's a question I see getting asked quite a lot, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people that struggle with it, and I thought I would give you guys our secrets, because we cut a heck of a lot of veneer boards, birch ply, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, if you could hit that subscribe button and the like button, that would be massive for me, please. It's all about giving back to the community, and hitting the like and the subscribes lets me know that I'm doing the right thing. Because let's be honest, right, we all take a little bit more from the community than we give back, that's for sure. So so that would really help. And you'll have an awesome day. Let us know below what you think to it, and I shall catch you next time. Check that view out, man. I'm lucky to be here, I'll tell you that, guys. Have a good one.